This video is for business leaders who talk too much, yet sometimes on rare occasions need to interrupt or talk over someone in the rare situations where it may be appropriate or necessary. So watch to the end of this video for bonus material about rapport building strategies that are superior to the parrot phrasing, that is simply repeating the last few words that somebody says, and a recommended video on networking tips based on a counterintuitive strategy. So this is the fourth video in a series of 4 about self-management for those who talk too much or work with others who talk too much, and that needs to be resolved to improve your business and your relationships in that business. So when should you interrupt? The oversimplified version is to say never, but that's not really true. It's rather more correct to say rarely and only when necessary. That is a more accurate answer, because interrupting is actually a social skill and a very necessary one, but needs to be used sparingly or limitedly whenever possible. So during consultations, when you're the teacher expert, it may be more appropriate to manage the expectations of the interaction, to set new social rules. So exceptions to the normal rule of never interrupting would be, sometimes I do this. I tell client, I might interrupt you during this consultation to give you immediate solutions as they occur to me. I don't think this is an ideal solution, but it is the best solution because you're either giving one thing up or another thing. If I wait, I may and almost certainly will forget these solutions or these helpful things that I'm being paid to give by the time they finish speaking. My services are premium in price and premium in quality, and I can't type fast enough while listening because multitasking is a myth. So it's usually more valuable for them to allow me to interrupt them in this specific and rare redefined context than to lose the insights and extra benefits they would gain from allowing me to do so. Now, you can manage expectations on the flip side and say, look, today is about you. You talk, I listen, and then do that and only take notes. So what's really important here is by announcing an agenda or an intent, you can change the normal social rules for the purpose of that interaction, because again, there are appropriate times. And I would say this is one of those, because you've asked them, if they say, no, you can never do that, well, then you're going to have to decide whether you want to continue the interaction or say, okay, but please understand you will be losing some of the benefit you would normally gain from the way I do this. So whenever possible, though, write or type ideas rather than interrupting them. It's far preferable. It makes them feel better. To build rapport, it's all about them. To feel validated, it's all about you. To have a valuable interaction, take turns. You're not necessarily the best judge of your own behavior. So my first client said to me something that illustrates this point, and that is, I asked him why he wanted to work with me, and he said, you listened to me and gave me advice based on my needs. They weren't cookie cutter solutions. I felt really paid attention. I felt you really paid attention and listened to me. I was both astounded and flattered and delighted by his response. Several of my LinkedIn recommendations reflect that same kind of thing. I'm not bragging here, but instead pointing out that that we are not always and perhaps never the best judges of our own behavior. I almost always feel that I talk too much in an interaction, but apparently others have seen some of my interactions with them differently. So maybe I'm finally getting the hang of the advice that I'm giving. So this is an important thing too. We receive both praise and constructive feedback at face value unless a compelling and or objective evidence give you reason to think otherwise. So if somebody says something nice to you, like you listened really well, it's like, really? Awesome. just take it. Unless you have some other reason to think otherwise, we're not going to discuss what you might need to do then. When either party becomes emotional, because it can happen anytime interruptions happen or when somebody gets feedback they don't really like, immediately, let me say this again. When either party becomes emotional, immediately questions or comments on feedback, they often do so by interrupting. So there's another example. It could be socially appropriate, but it's also true that when we're emotional, we're more likely to interrupt people, whether it's appropriate or not. So when that happens, or if that happens, take the feedback and stay silent. Even if you didn't like being interrupted, because nobody likes being interrupted. As the consultant, as the person giving the feedback, stop, let them say their piece, wait for a silence. And essentially what it is whether you listened and understood what they said, it's irrelevant to building rapport if they don't feel heard by you. And thank you for watching this far into the video. We're now to the bonus material. So this is an extension of what we've already talked about rapport building. So if rapport is your goal, prove that you are listening by asking relevant WH questions to learn more. So let me give you an example of this. Why can't the manufacturer make all the caps the same size? That's a specific question that I didn't ask, but could have asked in a conversation to prove that I was listening that well. Now, this is way better than the paraphrasing or parrot phrasing, since any idiot can listen just well enough to hear the last 3 to 5 words that you said with minimal superficial listening, but won't be capable of asking a relevant question. So this is useful in a lot of ways. So as soon as you hear or say, you don't understand, you weren't listening, one of two things is the case. It's either true, you don't understand, and you weren't listening, or you simply disagree. Both happen, and both are acceptable. If you do understand, is it the best time to express that, or should you wait until you're certain that your partner is feeling heard? I would suggest that is the best way to go, is to wait for a silence. And if it doesn't happen, maybe this is the wrong conversation and you need to have that another time. Use your best judgment in the situation you're in to decide whether that's the right course of action. If the situation is reversed and they say they understand, but you're not convinced, as is the case for most people, check for understanding by asking a clarifying question like, which way do you think would work best? And the beauty of this particular question, it's not the only question, is if they weren't listening, they'll go, I'm sorry, which way do you think is best? Well, you understood. So which part do you think would be better? Since that's not going to work, or you disagree with that, what way would you recommend? And now what really happens is, if they understand, they should be able to answer that question almost immediately. If they don't understand or they weren't listening, it will usually be obvious to both of you. So what's a really important point here this isn't, aha, I gotcha. This isn't any kind of, and I told you so moment, tripping over my tongue here. It's a, how can I help you understand moment. This isn't about judging. This isn't about catching them to show them they're wrong, because that is going to be the wrong dynamic for any constructive conversation. All of this must be done non-judgmentally, or as non-judgmentally as you possibly can, or not at all, or it's going to go south really, really fast. If you can't do that, drop it and say something like, should we come back to this later, or let's circle back on that later, because it's not the right time for you if you're not going to be able to interact on that in a constructive way. So whatever their answer will define your next step because you gave them a choice. So that's actually the power of asking a question. Should we table that for now? It gives them a choice, and then be prepared to manage with that choice, whatever it happens to be. So if you or they are getting heated or upset, it's a good time to pause, reflect, and table that point, as I've already said. So the other alternative, of course, is or go forward knowing emotions are likely to escalate. This is the more dangerous option, but especially if you gave them the choice, now it's back on you and you can go, okay, I know they're upset, so I'm going to need to de-escalate this since we're going forward. So if you choose to continue, be prepared for one or both parties to go into an amygdala hijack. So that's when your fight, flight, free, or freeze response kicks in and rationality goes out the window and therefore is best avoided. This is when people suddenly turn into children, regardless of age or intelligence. That's essentially what amygdala hijack is you lose the ability to reason rationally or maybe even speak at all. So that's it for this video. The recommended video, and I've actually got two for you today, is a networking tip or networking tips, connect selectively. And I'll put a link there for that or in the description, depending on where you see this video, and how to interrupt a conversation politely, which is by Vanessa Van Edwards, which is specifically about the mechanics of interrupting that I did not cover in this video because that was not the primary goal of it. So if you enjoyed this video or got any value out of it, please share the love by sharing this video. This has been Crush It Club 229, When and How to Interrupt Others. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.